to that's a reminder that you all are all being recorded right now. So welcome to Virtual Interviewing with Confidence, a webinar hosted by the Albers Placement Center featuring Paul Bauer, who is a recruiter over at Tableau. I'm Abby and I work in the Albers Placement Center. And before I turn it over to Paul, there are a few just housekeeping things I wanted to mention, as well as another event that we have this week. We have another webinar info session titled Breaking into Career Opportunities in Commercial Real Estate with CBRE, and that is on Thursday, May 21st at 12:30. You can visit Handshake or direct any questions to us over at the APC. And then, as Paul mentioned, we'll have our mics muted throughout, and then we'll take some time at the end for questions. And we are very fortunate to have Paul Bauer and Carrie here with us today. They're both recruiters over at Tableau, and I will actually turn it over to them to introduce themselves. Thanks for being here.
Awesome. Yeah, we are excited to be here. So thank you all for joining us today. You are welcome to chat your questions into the panel. At the bottom, you'll see there's a few little circles. There should be one that looks like a chat bubble, and you can chat questions or comments in there. So please use that. I will be monitoring that as we're going and trying to stay on top of that. But yeah, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and we can get started. So yeah, so thank you all for inviting us to do this. I know I was looking forward to it this weekend. I'm normally on video calls all day anyways, but it's fun getting to help people, and hopefully this helps you all. So to introduce ourselves, Carrie, do you want to actually kick it off and then I'll go?
Sure. Hello, everyone. I'm Carrie. I am the campus team over at Tableau. I have been at Tableau for almost 7 years, which is mind-blowing. Working in the campus space for about the past 5. Really excited for today. We are in the midst of welcoming our 102 interns on board virtually this summer. So in between all of that, I'm excited to talk to you all today. So please keep the questions coming. I will be available at the end for Q&A, but if Paul needs me, I can jump in and answer any questions in the middle also. But nice to meet everyone, and I will hand it over to Paul.
Thank you, Carrie. And I also just realized I'm not able to see the Q&A as I'm presenting, so I think you can see that. Do you mind?
I got it. I'm on it.
Awesome. So my name is Paul Bauer. I am a recruiter at Tableau on the campus team. I have been there now it'll be 4 months later this week. So not a lot of time, but I feel like I've connected with the team really, really well, in large part thanks to Carrie. So I'm excited to be here and chat with y'all. Before Tableau, I was at Expedia and Amazon. So I've been in campus recruiting for quite a while. And I started off my career actually working in career centers with students down at Pacific Lutheran University and Indiana University before that. So we can jump right in. Ideally, ideally this is helpful. That's the goal. So please take notes, ask questions. I'm here, Carrie and I are here presenting to you, but you should make sure you're getting what you want from this as you're choosing to show up. So please take advantage of us. So what I'm going to cover today is some researching the STAR method. We'll talk about a story matrix. I want to spend some time there. Talk about questions, case study, virtual interviewing, and then some FAQ and Q&A. So starting with the research, you should areas, starting with the company, the job, and yourself. And tell me if I need to slow down or pause or anything, but those are the 3 areas you want to research. So let's start with the company. You should be able to answer these questions. So what's the mission and vision? What are the values? Who founded this? What year did they do it? And what's out in the media about this company? Both, what are they producing about themselves? And what are other people producing about them? That should help inform some of your questions later and make sure that the conversation is relevant as you have some of this small talk or chat. What I do is I do bring notes to every interview. And so I would have just a small section at the top of my notepad where I've got this stuff that I can reference it. You know, it's unlikely that you're going to be asked to articulate the mission in a meeting. But if you are, you should have it ready. And if you're not, you should be able to interwork some of the fundamentals of that mission into the conversation. So the next is researching the job. I actually do researching the job description is the first thing I do even before I apply. This is a huge part of how I write resumes as well. But for interviews, if you've not researched a job already, I've got a job description right here. These are the first 4 bullet points from a customer service job description that I found on LinkedIn. So it's actually a job. And so what I always do is on the left side, I will pull up my job description. And on the right side, I'll have a blank Word doc. Side note, you should always copy your job description and put it into a Word doc and save it in that Word doc. And when I was just getting out of college, I interviewed for a job, or I got an interview for a job that I applied to about 3 or 4 weeks ago, and I didn't save the job description, and the link had been taken down off the website. So I went into an interview and had no clue the core skills that they were looking for. I didn't get that job. So since then, I've always made sure that I save the job description in a Word doc so I can reference it. But when I say research the job description, here's what I mean. So we've got the job description on the left. On the right, you've got a blank sheet of paper. And you'll see that I call this resume prep because I do this for the resume also. I go through and I analyze the job description word for word. You should start at the very top of the job description, not just where it says summary of duties or responsibilities. And so anything that is a skill-based verb or that has action in it, you can pull over and put it on the right side. Once it's on the right side, you're just going to make a bullet point list of all of it. And even if it says the same word multiple times, you should write it down multiple times. The reason for this is once you're done, you'll go through, see how many times they listed that word, and reorganize it based on the words that they said the most throughout the job description. That should tell you which skills they're mostly going to ask you about and which skills are the highest priority for them. You can also put the content into themes, as you'll see I did here. So on the left, I've highlighted the things that I pulled over: identify opportunities, improve process, share findings and recommendations, etc. And on the right, you'll see that I've created some themes of process improvement, collaboration, and attention to detail. This all came from these 4 bullet points on the left side. So chat in the chat box if this is not making sense. And Carrie's going to interrupt me and let me know. I have my Slack turned off, so I won't get any messages that you send me, Carrie. But yeah, so if this is not making sense, let me know if we need to spend some more time here. But hopefully this is making sense how you're analyzing the job description. And as you're preparing for an interview, what you've got here on the right is going to be so much easier to understand and quickly think about, as opposed to what you've got on the left. I'm going to move on. So researching you and the company. So this is actually taken from, this is my own content that I have here. This is taken from when I interviewed at Facebook. Some of their values at this time were to be bold and take risks and focus on impact, solving the hardest problems. So what I did is I just wrote a bullet point underneath it. And again, I am sharing this with a lot of people. Normally you wouldn't. So you're welcome to put acronyms or quick notes and only things that you would understand. You're never actually going to show it to people. It doesn't really matter. So I have some bullet points around what did I do when I took risks, or what did I do when I was focusing on the impact or solving the hardest problem. So I'm marrying myself with the content that the company's asking for. I'm going to do that again with my resume. So this is and I think, no, I'll show you that later, I think. This is a snapshot of my resume. So before I go into any interview, I will write a star story, and we're going to talk more about that in a minute. I hope you've heard it before. If you visited the Career Center, I feel very confident they've told you. But you should write a star story underneath every bullet point. Also, when I was younger and interviewing, it was one of my first interviews, and I wrote a resume that I thought sounded so good and I was really jazzed about. And the first question for the interviewer, they looked at like the I don't know, the bottom third, fourth of my resume, picked a bullet point and said, tell me about this. And it was a bullet point that I maybe elaborated on or made sound really good, and could not back up. I also didn't get that job. So since then, I've learned that I need to make a star story about every single bullet point on my resume. And I'm not bringing this as my notes to my job interview, to be clear. This is just what I'm doing ahead of time to prepare, to kind of have it in my head. We're all different. I do this about 48 hours before my interview because it helps if it's fresh in my memory. The goal, and I want to be really clear on this, the goal is not to memorize this. The goal is to have some talking points that are readily available to answer a multitude of questions. You should not be reading from a script. So this is what I did. I'm going to keep moving. So that's how I'm researching the company, the job, and then myself in relationship to the company and the job. Any questions about that? I'm going to pause so you can chat in if you have questions. I'm also going to, at Tableau, we're going through an acquisition with Salesforce. So I actually have two computers. So I'm going to mute my other computer, which is making a lot of noise right now. There we go. Okay, so that should have been enough time for any questions to come through. If there are any, if not, I'll keep going.
None on the chat.
Okay, excellent. So STAR. STAR is used for behavior-based questions. It stands for situation, task, action, result. This is not a natural way of talking. So if you know you have an interview coming up, I suggest practicing and talking only in STAR to your friends, family, etc. So the situation would be that I needed to prepare for a virtual interviewing webinar. The task was that I looked at webinars I'd done previously, and the action I did, or the task was that I needed to make it relevant to students. The action I took was editing it a couple of days before, sending it to the Career Center, making sure that we were good to go. And the result was that everybody got jobs. So you can see how that's not a natural way of talking. So I would try to do that in your day-to-day life, even if it's just about going to the grocery store, about what you had for lunch. Not all the time, but if you know you have an interview coming up, it's worth practicing. You know that a question is ready for STAR when it's a behavior-based question. Behavior meaning they're asking for an example of your previous behavior. So some good hints for that would be things like, tell me about a time when. Give me an example of. Have you ever, or I see this on your resume, taught me through that experience. So you should be ready for a STAR question then. And I think I've got one next. You can give an example. Aha, yeah. I'm gonna take a sip of water. So when I answer questions in STAR, I actually do use the words situation, task, action, result in my answer. It's a good guiding point for me, and I don't think it sounds awkward. You should obviously use your own voice. You don't want to be rehearsed, but I want to give you an example of what that looks like. So if this was the question during an interview, how have you worked through ambiguity? I'd say, well, the situation was I was the lead organizer for a 40,000 person diversity conference that was scheduled about 2.5 months after I started at the company. It was across the country, and I had to figure out the logistics of housing and flights. The task was in those 10 weeks, I had about 80 people that I needed to attend the conference with me. We needed to interview candidates, host networking sessions, and drive strong results, which really means hires. The action I took on that was I reached out to our employee resource groups, which are kind of like student groups for different, for people who have different interests. So I reached out to the employee resource groups and targeted people that were in jobs we hired for. So we hired for 11 different job profiles like product management, finance, customer service, etc. I answered all the questions that I thought they would have ahead of time in an FAQ, such as who paid for travel, when was the conference, could they show up a day late, etc. And the result was that I actually had 125 people say they wanted to go to the conference with me. So I got to pick the 80 that I thought best represented the profiles and diversity that we were looking for. And ultimately, I increased diverse hiring by 11%. So of course, that's easy for me. I'm reading directly from the screen. And again, I don't ever encourage you to memorize your script like that. And I don't think you should have a script. The point of that was that I did use the word situation, task, action, result in my answer. It keeps me on track. And my answer is roughly 90 seconds to maybe 2 minutes, which is around what you're targeting there. So I hope this is a good example. I want to note how it used numbers and was a very specific example. Because of course I've worked through a lot of ambiguity and I could say, oh, I've done that a lot. I did it at this place and at that place. The more specific and detailed you are, the more the interviewer will remember your story. And the more that they can relate to it. If they can relate to it, they're going to like you. If they like you, they're going to want to work with you. So make sure you're giving details in your story. I want to move on to the story matrix. Really saving a lot of time here for Q&A, I recognize. But I hope this is making sense. Chat something, even just a hello, to make sure you're actually here with us. I'm learning lots. Thank you, Malia. I appreciate that. I get little chat bubbles, it turns out, when people chat in. So story matrix. So this is something that I developed when I was interviewing a couple years ago, and I've used it since. And it's helped me and it's helped a few people that I've worked with. Let's find out what you all think about it. So this is the specific example of when I was interviewing at Amazon. And I realized that I should say this at Tableau, but this is my actual experience. It all led me to the best company ever. So I call this a story matrix. What we've got on the left is the title of my story. So remember earlier when we went through, here. So on my resume, when I had like the situation, task, action, result, reach my bullet points, I gave each of these a title, mostly just the situation. And I put it on the left side. Across the top, I've got different leadership principles. I've got skills that I know they're looking for. I've got values that they have that I'm probably going to be asked about. And I know that because of the job description breakdown that I did previously. So I'm taking those themes, putting it up here, and then taking my stories and putting it on the left. And then essentially I've just created a matrix of which story is going to meet which skill or theme that they're looking for. So that way, if I'm getting a question around the time that I actually owned something and it was a larger project, well, you can find ownership and you can say I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 examples of a time that I've done that. So even typically in interviews, you're going to be interviewed by at least 2, if not upwards of 4 or 5 different interviewers, typically one-on-one, maybe 2-on-1. So you might be asked a really similar question a few times. Well, I'm going to know which one that I've already used, which example I've used, and use a different example. So this is the way that I've approached that and that I've found helpful. I actually bring this in my interview. So when I'm in person, I bring it, it's right there in front of me. It is my cheat sheet. An interview is not a test. An interview is a conversation. You have intentional conversations every day. Every time that you've eaten out, you've had an intentional conversation with that person taking your order. That's all this is. And you're allowed to have these notes. The person interviewing you is going to have notes also. So not only should you have these prepared, but you should take notes as they're asking questions. Oftentimes interviewers will ask multiple questions at once. So you're welcome to say, hold on, I want to make sure I got all that. So it was about ambiguity, scale, and a longer project. Is that right? Are those the 3 things? Yes, great. And then you can make sure that you're checking those off as you go. I saw something pop up. Do you want to ask that now or later?
Just commenting that this matrix is super helpful.
Oh, okay, great. So developing questions. Let's go there. So developing questions for interviewers. There's some things that you want to know ahead of time. And there's other things that you're going to need to ask during the interview. Before we even get to that part, you should have questions developed. This is really where your notes come in handy. These should be written down ahead of time. Ideally, you know who you're interviewing with, whether it's their exact name or potentially just their title or level in the company. You should look them up on LinkedIn ahead of time. You should connect with them. But the question that I have for you and that you want to have for yourself is if you had 2 job offers, exact same job, how are you going to know which one to accept? So actually think about that for a second. I'd love for you to maybe write down some things that you're like, what are some things that you'd want to know? Go ahead and chat that in the Q&A. Trying to make this a little more interactive.
We did have one question come through about the matrix. Did you want me to ask that now, or do you want to wait until they're done?
Let's do this and then we can go back to it.
Okay.
So if you had 2 job offers, what do you want to know? How would you know which one to accept? I can pull this up.
We've got culture is one.
Oh, yeah. What else? So we probably want to know stuff about like money, like how much I'm getting paid. Is one free and is one paid?
Benefits,
Benefits, yeah.
salary, career development.
Yeah. So you should not ask about the salary during the interview. I want to be really clear about that. You can network ahead of time to learn more. So there are really good websites such as payscale.com, salary.com. Glassdoor has some things on there. There's also the Bureau of Labor Statistics, which does not sound as sexy. It's not. There's a reason for that. The website for that is B as in bureau, ls.gov. And on that, they update average salaries for different industries every 2 years. So you can use that, at least they used to. I haven't checked it in a little bit, but I think they still do. So you can check that to find what the average salary would be. Keep in mind, the average salary is not likely where you're going to come in. The average person has more experience than just graduating college. So we just want to manage your expectations there. But if you're networking with people ahead of time, searching LinkedIn and finding people that have a similar job title or work at that company and requesting 15, 20-minute coffee chats, it's totally appropriate in that conversation, which is not an interview, for you to say, I've been doing my research and it seems that X number of dollars or X salary is appropriate for this type of job and this location. Is that competitive? Do you find this company to be competitive with that? That's how you should ask that question. You're not asking them their salary. That would be inappropriate. But you are allowed to do your research and say, this is what I was targeting. Am I in line with what's common in this company, in this location, etc.? So I wanted to talk on that because yes, you should know salary, but you shouldn't ask that during the interview. Let me come back here. Yeah, there we go. So you probably want to know salary, time off, how decisions are made, company culture, promotion opportunities, etc. So some of these things, like promotion opportunities and how decisions are made, you can totally ask during the interview. During my interview, and I may have even asked this of Carrie. Carrie interviewed me for my current job. No pressure. Like, give me an example. Like, do you have a recent decision that the team maybe disagreed with or really agreed with, and how did that come to light? How did that play out? That's going to give you some insight into the company culture, to your ownership on the team. And I'm just giving you some examples. Obviously, these are your values. That's what we're really talking about. So you need to identify what your values are and determine what you would do from there. But you should use the interview as an opportunity to validate those questions, to know if you would accept the offer or not. Just because you get an offer does not mean you have to accept it.
Paul, we did have one question come through, which I think is pretty relevant, asking if, let's say, you're interviewing with a company, is it to tell them, I have an offer from a different company. What are the differences between you and this offer that I have? And I don't even necessarily think that this has to be salary based. But just in general, do we think that that's a good idea?
Yeah, definitely. I think the way you phrase it is important, and who you talk to is important. So I encourage you to give a heads up to the recruiter. The recruiter is kind of like your partner in this. They want that job filled also. So you can lean on them and say, hey, I do have an offer from another company. I'm curious, like, can we talk about some of the details of it to make sure that this is a good use of everyone's time or that we're on the same page? Because if your offer from company A is $90,000 and your offer from company B could be in the $40,000 range, and money is your value, which it does not mean it's everyone's value, then you may make a different decision. Or if one of those is 45-minute commute every day, but they allow you to work from home 3 days a week, that could change some things. So there's a lot to consider. So definitely bring it up. I think during the interview, um, I I think that's potentially a little risky, um, though not out of line. You could say something to an interviewer and say, I'm actively interviewing. I'm a recent graduate, so I'm looking for jobs. And company X has given me an offer, and I'm excited about it. But obviously, sitting here today with you, I'm learning a lot about this company and really excited about this also. But could you help me understand some of the differences or why you've chosen to be here today? That's probably how I would phrase it.
Yeah, I would just add to that, Paul, completely. I would keep the salary to the recruiter, more of those tactical things to you and the recruiter, that relationship. And if it is a situation where you do want to talk about, I do have this other offer from a great company, instead of making the comparison, make it more so tell me about you and tell me about this company. And then you can make the comparisons on the back end. But really keep it, there's no need to not tell them that you do have that offer, but really make it that time that you're spending with that particular interviewer about that company that you are with right then and there. And then you can make those distinctions on the back end.
Yep, completely agree. I think that's all I have on this, but I know you said there was a question about the matrix. Let's go back to that. And if other questions on this come in, then we can get to answer that also. I think we're doing pretty good on time.
Yes, let me get back to it. Okay. Would you recommend doing story matrix on a high level for the company value and mission, like to show how you fit into the company culture?
Um, in part, I mean, that's a little bit what you're looking at here. So these are the leadership principles. So I would. Um, not every company has this kind of setup in terms of their values. Um, but like with Tableau, I know we have core values, and I did put those into a chart like this, and I think we have like 5 core values, and so I put those as the first 5 columns, and then the other 7 or 8 columns were about the skills that I knew I was going to be asked about based on the job description, and my conversation with the recruiter, because you can validate that with the recruiter and say, it sounds like this job's really focusing on X, Y, and Z. Are we on the same page there? Is that what you would say as well? And they can add some additional context to that before you go into your full-on interview. Do we have anything else about the questions, or should I move on?
Let's see. Okay, here's one more about the matrix. How long did it take you to create your story matrix? Did you dedicate some time each day or do it all in one go?
Yeah, so this is again where each of us are different. I did it in one go. Um, I know that I work really well under pressure. So I will wait until the last 24 to 48 hours and make sure that I'm free. I'd done it before I waited, and then I also had booked myself completely up, and that wasn't great. And so I know that I do well under pressure. And because of that, I will just block out a day and do it all in a day just because I like that pressure, but only if I have the time to do it. Um, and then I just kind of commit to it, and I walk around, I tell the story, I just talk to myself, I go on drives and say, tell me about yourself. And I will tell myself about myself. Um, or I'll just come up with interview questions and audibly answer them, not just in my head, but I will actually speak and answer them. There is a difference. It's not something, the reason that I don't do it too far ahead of time, and I don't encourage you to do it too far ahead of time either. Like notice how this is all acronyms and like 4 or 5 words on each one. I do not want you to walk in there and have a script or have it memorized. That will not come across well. Part of the interview is you being able to be conversational and that they want to work with you. I think it's totally, for me, I do well doing this ahead of time because it reminds me of my stories and the details. And then this is what I bring with me. So do this, but as long as you're not creating a script or reading directly from it. let's move on to a case study. So case studies, these are used to understand how you think about situations and problems. Typically for roles that are going to require some strategic thought, you are not actually expected to know the right answer to the question. This is going to feel weird. So some examples would be like, how would you bring an existing product to a new market? Or how would you approach selling in a market that's experiencing record low revenues? So notice how these questions are not behavior-based. Typically, the interviewer will set it up and say, I want to give you a case study, or let's talk through an issue that we actually faced a few months ago that we're in right now. I'd love to see how you would approach this. So they'll typically set it up in that kind of way, which is an indicator, okay, this is a different type of question. And oftentimes these questions can go on for longer than that, the previous behavior-based questions. So I worked at companies where case study questions last a full hour and we really dive deep into it. These are there to replicate what a meeting or collaboration session with you would look like. So Carrie and I think last week, I think Carrie and I had 6 hours of just one-on-one time together, which were honestly probably my favorite 6 hours of the week because it's not as stressful. But like that's what this is replicating. So I want to talk through how to approach this. And I have this picture on the right here because it reminds me to tell you all that you should ask these questions and speak out loud while answering and thinking about this question, because the job that you have to answer this question is to provide a window into the way you think. So that's what this picture is there for. It's a reminder to myself because it doesn't really make sense of the slide. Yeah, so again, that's why they're asking you this, is they want to know the way you think. So some things to think about ahead of time. Who are our competitors? How is success measured? Is there a budget or timeline? Is anyone else in this market already? And is there any other insight I should know? And then think out loud.
What kind of business are you looking for?
Sorry, Siri just thought I was talking to them. So you're totally fine to write down the question. It's probably going to be detailed, but I would start asking about these things. Take some notes on how you want to approach it, and then go. So common mistakes. I know I've asked a question. I was meeting with some students a few months ago when I started at Tableau and prepping them for some interviews. And I gave them a case study question, and it was the product question of how would you bring an existing product to a new market? And they just started talking and never once, and they had really good ideas. They never once asked me what the product was, which is probably really important for bringing it to a new market. In my head, the product that we were talking about was something that you had to plug in. And so with another student who did ask that question, we got into a detailed conversation around the actual plug and what countries would have a similar plug that we already had manufactured, which is a really interesting conversation. So you can see how that's related to the question. So, but if they never asked what the product is, it wouldn't have come up. And then think out loud to answer these questions and talk with the interviewer. This should be a conversation. I'm going to pause there. Case study questions are a little bit unique and not so much the norm. I would say most of you, 90% of you, will have mostly behavior-based questions. It wouldn't be uncommon to have some question where you do have to collaborate with them. Do you have any questions on case studies at all?
We have one. In case questions, I've gotten the impression that I wasn't supposed to ask questions. Is that ever the case?
Obviously, I wasn't in your experience, but I think that it's totally appropriate to ask questions. Again, think about it like a group project. If Carrie and I were going to sit down together and we had to go recruit in a market that we've never been to. Okay, well, like, how many people, what roles are we recruiting, and what level, and who's the hiring manager? Like, those are all probably appropriate questions that we want to sit down and talk about.
Great. And another one, how deep should I dig into the case? How much detail should I ask?
you will likely continue to ask questions as you go. These questions are just here to get you started. You can also be aware of time. So if you know that your interview goes for another 10 minutes, probably not super deep. If you're starting off the interview with this question, then you could go deep. The interviewer will stop you when they've gotten what they need.
And this one's getting a lot of traction. How do interviewers measure your answers to the case studies?
It's not as direct as the behavior-based, which is why it's less common because it can't be as standardized. But they would typically measure this. They would measure this with the other people that are interviewing you, so with behavior-based questions and with their own, like, is the way that you approached it correct? And not really correct, but is the way you approached it logical, is what I would say. Were you asking questions that are getting to a solution?
We might have one more. Let me see. Oh, what is the length of appropriate thinking time?
I wouldn't go more than about 2 minutes. 2 minutes of silence is a lot of silence.
Yeah, it is.
If you say, I'm going to be quiet for a second and think through this because I love this question, but I want to make sure I'm organizing it properly. And so while you're doing that, take notes and write stuff down. Don't just be sitting there staring at them.
Right. It's about setting the expectation about what's going on in your head. Another question, are there certain questions to avoid asking with case questions? Something that would put off the interviewer or be seen as a dumb question?
Nothing's coming to my mind immediately, but I think this gets back to the point at the bottom, which you need to bridge the gap between your thoughts. That is your responsibility. So if you have a question that seems out of the blue, you need to share why you're asking that question. Don't let them assume why you're asking that question or think like they know where it's going. You need to tell them, I have this question. The way I got there was X, Y, and Z. And then as long as it logically connects, you should be fine.
All right, I think that is it for these.
Okay, stellar. So the last is just around virtual interviewing. So something that I want you all to know is that, so Carrie, and I don't know if you already said this, Carrie, where do you work most of the time?
Well, Paul, I work remotely in Portland, Oregon. I was in the Seattle office for about 5.5 years before I decided to do something different. And for some reason, they told me yes. So I've been working remote for a little over a year before the whole quarantine took place. But yeah, I am down in Portland.
So since I started at Tableau 4 months ago, Carrie and I have seen each other in person, I think 3 times. And maybe if we weren't in quarantine, we would have seen each other 4 or 5 times. That's not a lot considering I've been here for 4 months. At previous companies I've worked at, my manager actually sat in a completely different office. I sit in Seattle, he sat in Austin. And I only met him and my other colleague who I worked with for 2 years 4 times. So the virtual element of the interview is likely only going to be unique to you, and not so unique to the interviewer. So I just say that to you so that you can feel a little more at ease and that it's that this is normal and likely a part of what your everyday life would be like, especially at companies that are larger. At companies that are smaller, it may not be as normal. So I want to talk about some virtual interview tips and tricks. I am going to go back to that FAQ slide in just a second. So you should actually see my setup here. I have a coffee table and then a little, I guess another little coffee table that was in the bathroom on top of it, and then about 8 books with my laptop on it. So that way you're not just staring up at all of my chins, because this isn't a great angle. So do take some time to think about what the other person's going to see and make sure that it's what you want them to see. Ideally, I would move this light because I don't like how distracting that is, but this is the hand we were dealt. So think about the lighting, think about the angle that they're going to see. And make sure that your microphone's working and clear. I have a headset right here in case for some reason something goes wrong, it's hard to hear me. I'm ready to go with a different system so that way we can chat. And I suggest, and I hope that you all are staying connected with friends and family right now, but you're probably already doing this. Just test it out in a different way. Typically, if recruiters are sending you stuff for a virtual interview, there's the opportunity to test out your mic and camera ahead of time. So definitely take advantage of that. I encourage you to take advantage of it at least a day in advance, because if there are issues, you want to let that recruiter know ahead of time, not 10 minutes before the interview. As far as types of virtual interviews, so there are phone screens, which are virtual and oftentimes not on video, just literally on the phone. There's higher view or different recorded interviews. And with those, I think the same rules apply. Obviously, you're not going to have someone on the other side talking to you, but you can still be aware of the angle, the lighting, and the microphone. The microphone's probably the most important if I had to prioritize them. And then there's live virtual interviews, Zoom, WebEx, Google Hangouts, etc. And so these are going to typically be a little bit longer, 45 to 60 minutes. And you'll likely have multiple of them, 2, 3, 4. So those are different types that I'm sure you all are experiencing and going through right now. And these are the tips that I think that you should review ahead of time. And yeah, I guess, Carrie, would you add anything else here? You've been working virtually longer than I have, obviously. So are there things that you would add here?
No, I think you really nailed it. I think that, like you said, the microphone is truly key. Being able to hear the person. Also in the cadence of just giving, I think all of these Zoom, WebEx are getting better with their technology, but sometimes there's a delay when you are talking to multiple people, even if it's just one person. So making sure to, as the interview's going on, understanding the cadence and understanding, is there a delay? Because there's a lot of times even now where we're cutting people off and we have to raise our hands because it's a little bit, a second delay, but then we're talking over. Making sure that you're understanding how that flow is going. I always tend to use my headset just because I think that it sounds clearer. Sometimes when you are speaking just into your computer, there can be a lag. And so you're talking, you can see the person's talking, but the voice just isn't matching up with the face. And so again, this is definitely going to be something that is different for every situation that you're in. But the things I've found, again, headset if you have it, and then just giving some time to make up for that pause that might occur.
One thing to note on that is when you're not talking, I do suggest muting yourself. So notice how Carrie goes back and forth on mute. And when she spoke, I went on mute. So that way you didn't hear my water bottle with my ice. So it also allows you a couple extra seconds of thinking time before you have to respond. And it's like excusable. And you can see when someone wants to say something, like you can see Carrie came off mute.
One more thing, which has actually been pretty fun in the working environment, but make sure you're in a space where it's just you. If you don't want any unexpected visitors happening in your interview, make sure that you're in a room by yourself, or if you are in a place where there are other people, just make sure that they know that you need that quiet time. There's definitely been a bunch of surprises from people's pets or children or spouses, so which can make for fun when you're just on a regular meeting, but in an interview, it can probably throw you off. So just make sure that you are in a space that you feel comfortable and knowing that you're just by yourself.
And don't overthink it. They are working from home also. They have dogs and people in their house as well. Just address it ahead of time. Say, hey, when we get deliveries, the dog goes crazy. I might mute myself for 10 seconds. Totally fine. It's relatable. Feel free to ask questions about that. I did want to go back a slide that I skipped over. So if you've how to address being laid off upfront and honest, layoffs are not a reflection of you. Practice interviews, speak and star. And make sure you get that result. It's really easy to forget to do the result and just talk about your action, but not what came of that action. What can you do to stand out as students? Speak to your relevant skill sets, and index on your coachability. You are students. Your job last 4 years has been to learn. So you are a master of being trained. Tell them that. So I think that's the benefit that you have right now, is that you're not coming in with years of experience, which means you're not coming with the good or the bad habits. Um, if you're looking to get into a new field, and I imagine the fields for all of you are mostly new, depending on if we have some grad students here. Informational interviews are how 70% of people get their next job is through networking. Right now, people are more than ever open to networking and connecting. You have to reach out to them. I think if you want to talk to, if you're actively job searching, I think that you want to be on the phone or video with at least one, if not two people a week. And I think that to get those people, to get to two people a week, you probably need to reach out to 9 or 10 people a week, asking if they'll spend time with you. And you'll likely get about a 20 to 30% response rate. So that's my recommendation there. And then what do I wear? And we'll dress like you work there, or match the company culture and go up one step. So I'm wearing jeans and a t-shirt. So if you were interviewing with me, I would probably expect you to have on jeans and maybe a button down, maybe. I actually, it's interesting because I think that's what most people expect. Personally, I don't care, because I think you can do the same quality work in whatever you wear. But I think that most people will look for you to dress the company culture or one step above it.
We did have one question. I'm going to go back a ways, but it was in about the star. So what is a good length for each part of a star answer?
Yep. I want to answer that in just a second because I realized I forgot to address these. Best practices for virtual interviews. You can read this. Ask if you get disconnected who should call each other back. Confirm that they can hear and see you. Go on mute when not talking, and have notes. Always have notes. Virtually, you get to have a lot of notes around you that remind you to smile or star, focus on results, or whatever the case, but always have notes. For a star story, it should be roughly 2 minutes in length, and 60% of that time should be on your action or result. So 60% of 2 minutes is going to be, just over a minute. So you've probably got 45 to 50 seconds to set this situation and task, and then you want to spend the rest of that time on the action and the result. I'm a little bit regretting that I said that, because I'm nervous that you are going to read scripts, which again, I don't want you to do. So you should spend, your answer should be about 2 minutes if you're practicing. But again, don't memorize anything. Just make sure that you're getting that action and the result in there, because that's why they're hiring you. They're not going to hire you because of the situation or the task. They're going to hire you because of what you did about that situation and task. I think we're in the Q&A section right now. So I'll go here. We've got about 10 minutes left in the call. If you all have questions, I can even just unmute folks, I believe. Let's see how we can do that together.
We have one that came through, actually a few.
Go for it.
Okay. Do you have any tips for making genuine connections with coworkers as a new grad starting work virtually?
Oh yeah. One of Carrie and mine's colleagues did this. So we use Slack, just an instant message tool. And she just posted and said, hey, I'm missing some connections that I would normally have around the office. Would anyone be up for a 15-minute water cooler chat? And anyone who liked that or commented on it, she just set up quick 15-minute chats with them. So even if you don't have that Slack feature, it is totally appropriate for you to email and say, hey, I'd love to get 20 minutes on the calendar and just connect. I'm missing a little bit of that relationship that would normally happen walking between meetings. And most people are also missing it and going to be open to it.
I think another thing that we're seeing, it doesn't necessarily breed intimate connections, but Paul and I actually did this, not even realizing we were doing it. We hosted office hours for our interns last week, and no one showed up, but it was just 60 minutes of Paul and I on the call. But we were talking, and then we just kind of veered into doing our work. And before we knew it, it was 60 minutes had gone past, and we kind of chatted here and there, but it was if we were sitting next to each other in the office. And I know that a bunch of our groups are doing that. You can just log in for an hour and there might be radio silence, there might be people chit-chatting. So I think it's just a good way just to feel like you're with somebody. And to connect. Not necessarily, it can be intimidating if it's 30 minutes of straight, just feeling like you have to answer questions or tell me about a time. It's just more of a space for you to hold for one another in case you wanted to have those kind of water cooler chats. Let's see.
Took the screen off. I can see some of the questions also.
Okay.
Which one were you going to go for?
I was going to go, what should I ask about in informational interviews?
Yeah, so, and actually I realized I didn't say this. So with interviewing holistically, informational or during an interview, you should never ask questions that you can get answers to online. So asking, when did Tableau and Salesforce merge? Not a great question. There's a lot of information on that online. Asking, wow, I saw that Tableau and Salesforce merged a year ago. How's that still impacting you? Much better question. So use the information that you can get online to ask better questions. During an informational interview, you should definitely demonstrate your research. So side note, an interview starts the moment you meet someone that ever has the potential to hire you. I'm going to say it again. An interview starts the moment you meet someone that ever has the potential to hire you. So likely many of you all have already started your interviews with people, whether that be virtually online of who you're connecting with on LinkedIn, or someone that you met in a coffee shop, or a professor, or anyone else in the student services space. Like, we are all full-time professionals who have a large network. So just be aware of that your reputation is out there. Questions for an informational interview are the questions on like the salary question better there, as they don't have the opportunity to hire you right then and there. And that's an important note. An informational interview is not a job interview. They're not likely giving you a job from that. You can ask what they like about the company, what they would change. You can ask, really it's about your values. But you should ask, I guess, things that you care about, the salary, the job promotion, especially if you want to know, like, what's it like for this certain population of people? So like, so I'm gay, so I can say, hey, is there an LGBTQ community here, or is there an employee resource group that I could be aware of? Because I might not want to disclose that in an interview, but I could disclose that when I'm networking, if you felt comfortable. So you could do the same thing with women's groups or people of color or things like that, because there oftentimes are different organizations that will be embedded in the company to support those.
Yeah, I would just piggyback off of that. Make sure that when you are going through that informational interview that you are asking questions that you want to know the answers to. So many times we get, what's your favorite part of the culture? And that can be so varying. So make sure, maybe you can tell them what you're anticipating or what your favorite part of a culture that you've worked at before, and then maybe then they can jump in and tell them their experience. So you will retain so much more information if you ask questions that mean something to you.
I see one here still on informational interviews. How long should they be? What should I consider the goal? I say ask for 20 minutes. 20 minutes is typically time that people either do or don't have, and often 20-minute meetings aren't common, so it will likely run long. And when you're asking for an informational interview or referrals or anything, like I would never ask Carrie, hey, can we meet sometime? Sure, I guess, like, yeah. But say, hey, Carrie, are you free next Tuesday morning or Wednesday afternoon? I'd love to grab 20 minutes with you. She can immediately look at her calendar and say yes or no, and it's going to cause her to answer that question. So being a little more specific in what you're asking for will help you. I recognize we have 4 minutes left, and I do have a 1:30 meeting. Mary Lou or Abigail, were there other things that you needed to chat about, or should we keep going with Q&A?
Nothing else that we need to cover, just aside from thanking you both for taking the time to share this helpful information. I know personally it was very, very helpful, and going to have some tips that I'm going to share with students moving forward. So thank you both for taking the time and hosting this. Very helpful.
Yes, thank you, Paul. Thanks, Carrie. Really do appreciate it. I really appreciate all the interview prep, as well as doesn't make any difference what kind of interview. So interesting also to hear how much you guys are already doing virtually for so long.
Yeah. Happy to be here. I recognize we've got a few minutes left, and I don't want to shortchange you all. So if you've got other questions, keep going. I can go right up till 1:30.
One was, oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I just love this question Hannah asked. Should I ask for a referral in the informational interview or wait for them to bring it up? Ask for a referral. The hardest part of networking is getting people to meet with you. So it's better if you can get a referral. So like if I was going to, so I didn't know Abigail until a couple weeks ago when we started emailing. So if I just reach out to her on LinkedIn, she may ignore it. She's like, oh, I don't know, Paul, we don't have any common connections. But if I put in the subject line, Mary Lou connection, she's likely going to open it because she's connected to Mary Lou, so she trusts me. Or she trusts Mary Lou, so she's more likely to trust me. So definitely ask for it. And again, similar to asking for a date and time, you want to be specific. So I'd say, hey, Abigail, now that you know a little bit more about me and my interest in X, Y, and Z, can you think of one or two people from the Career Center or from the place that you worked previously that I should meet with or might benefit from meeting? So I'm narrowing the focus down because people want to help, but they don't know how. So you have to help them help you. Sorry, Carrie, what were you going to say? I apologize.
No, I was just going to read one of the questions. There's a few more. The one I was going to ask was, what are the best ways to demonstrate self-awareness during an interview?
And you want me to answer that one?
I was thinking about that. I'm like, he's probably gonna make me answer this.
That's hard. I think the best thing you can do is practice and get comfortable with it. That way it's just going to alert your senses when something's going wrong or going right. So taking interviews with companies, even if you're not the most excited, you should do it to practice and to learn because you may be surprised. And then just making sure that you're virtually talking and hanging out with people so that you can get the sense of when things are going well or not. And I wonder if the Career Center office offers any like mock interviews or prep for interviews, because that could be another good way to practice.
Yes, students can schedule one-on-one appointments with us, and we can do a full mock interviews. So yes.
How exciting. I didn't even know that, but I was hoping it would be teed up properly.
And just one last thing on that, I think as much practice as you can get, the more comfortable, again, you will feel in your own skin, and you'll be able to answer those questions more authentically because you're not worried about answering the question because you've prepared. And so the more you can just get comfortable in that, I think the more self-aware you'll come across because you already are.
Thank you all so much. I'm going to stop recording now and I will share that with you. Yeah, thank you all for